The sirens were so loud I thought they'd split my skull open. I was standing in my living room, the one I'd painstakingly decorated over 30 years, watching two police officers try to explain something about abandonment laws while my grandson wailed in the background. The social worker kept repeating words like temporary guardianship and parental rights, but all I could hear was the echo of my daughter's voice from 2 years ago. "Just 1 month, Mom. I promise." 3 months earlier, I'd believed her. Let me take you back to when this all started, when I still had hope that things would work out the way she said they would. My daughter Maya called me on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. I was at the farmer's market, picking through tomatoes and dreaming about the little bakery I'd been saving for. 23 years of careful deposits, penny by penny, dollar by dollar. I was so close I could taste the flour dust in the air. "Mom," her voice cracked through the phone. "I need help." What mother says no to that? What mother hears her child's voice break and thinks about her own dreams first? I dropped the tomatoes back in the bin and told her I'd be right there. The vendor gave me an odd look, probably wondering why anyone would abandon perfectly good heirloom tomatoes. If only he knew. If only I'd known what I was really abandoning that day. The drive to Phoenix took 40 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another lifetime. I remember gripping the steering wheel, my hands sweating despite the air conditioning. Something felt off, a mother's instinct maybe, or just the accumulated wisdom of watching Maya make questionable decisions for 26 years. The closer I got to her apartment, the heavier my chest felt, like my body was trying to warn me about something my mind refused to see. She was standing outside her apartment building in Phoenix, this trendy downtown complex she could barely afford, holding a car seat with my newborn grandson bundled inside. The June heat was already brutal, shimmering off the pavement in waves. But what struck me wasn't the heat or the baby. It was Maya's face. She looked relieved. Not distressed, not desperate. Relieved, like someone who'd been waiting for the right moment to hand off a burden. "Just 1 month," she said, looking at me with those same eyes that used to beg for ice cream money. "The landlord's being impossible about the noise, and I need time to find a place that allows babies. Plus, your health has been so fragile lately. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little one around to keep you company?" I should have caught it then, that subtle manipulation. But instead, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Needed. Important. Useful again. The first week was actually beautiful, I won't lie. I'd wake up to Quinn's soft breathing in the bassinet I'd set up in my guest room. I'd forgotten how perfect babies smell, that combination of milk and powder and pure innocence. I'd rock him while the sun came up, whispering promises about the world he'd inherit, about how his grandmother would always be there for him. In those early mornings, everything felt possible. I convinced myself this was a gift, a second chance at those tender moments I'd been too stressed to fully appreciate when Maya was little. I'd been so young then, so overwhelmed by single motherhood after her father left. But now, financially stable and emotionally settled, I could do it right. I could be the calm, present caregiver I'd always wished I'd been able to be. I took photos of Quinn constantly that first week, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, his scrunched-up face when he yawned, the way his whole body would startle in his sleep like he was falling. I sent them all to Maya with little messages. He smiled today. Sleeping like an angel. We're doing great. Looking back, I realize I was trying to convince both of us that this arrangement was working perfectly, that it was sustainable, that she'd made the right choice leaving him with me. But somewhere around week 3, I noticed Maya wasn't looking for apartments anymore. Her visits became shorter, her excuses longer. "The market's terrible right now, Mom. Every place I look at falls through. Just a little longer, okay?" I found myself nodding, adjusting, accommodating. That's what mothers do, right? We bend until we're shaped entirely around our children's needs. It's like we're made of water, flowing into whatever container they provide. By month 2, my house had transformed. Toys colonized every surface, bright plastic things that sang annoying songs when you accidentally stepped on them at 3 a.m. The smell of baby formula replaced the scent of the lavender sachets I used to keep in every room. My carefully curated space, the sanctuary I'd built after my husband died, became unrecognizable. I know you're probably thinking I should have said something, that I should have put my foot down. But here's what you don't understand about blood ties. They mess with your head in ways nothing else can. Every time I opened my mouth to protest, I'd remember Maya as a little girl, how she'd crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. How could I turn away that same person, now grown and struggling? Chapter 2. Of this nightmare began when I stumbled across a statistic that stopped me cold. I was scrolling through Facebook one evening, Quinn finally asleep after 2 hours of crying, and I saw it. 1 in 5 nursing home residents experience neglect at least once a year. 20%, 1 in 5. I sat there in the blue glow of my phone screen, and something clicked. If I couldn't protect myself now, while I was still relatively healthy and independent, what chance did I have later? Was I creating a pattern that would follow me into my most vulnerable years? But I pushed the thought away. Family comes first. That's what I'd always believed, what my own mother had drilled into me. You sacrifice for your children. You put their needs above your own. It's the natural order of things, the way it's always been done. I started keeping a mental tally of the sacrifices, though I tried not to. The bakery fund that was supposed to hit its goal by my 60th birthday. I was dipping into it for diapers and formula because Maya was always between jobs or waiting for a paycheck. The volunteer position at the botanical gardens I'd finally worked up the courage to apply for. I had to turn it down because who would watch Quinn? The poetry workshop that met on Thursday evenings downtown canceled. The weekend trip to Sedona with my sister postponed indefinitely. The quiet mornings with coffee and a book replaced by Sesame Street at volumes that seemed specifically designed to prevent coherent thought. You know what hurts most? It wasn't even the big dreams dying. It was the small deaths, the tiny erasures of self that happened so gradually I barely noticed until they'd accumulated into something massive. I stopped wearing my favorite perfume because Quinn would spit up on everything. I stopped cooking the foods I loved because I was too exhausted. I stopped calling my friends because what was there to talk about except my permanent babysitting arrangement? Every conversation became about Quinn. How's the baby? Is he sleeping through the night yet? You must love having him there. And I'd smile and nod because what else could I do? Admit that I felt trapped? That I was drowning in resentment while simultaneously feeling guilty for resenting an innocent child? I found myself thinking about my bakery at the strangest times. While changing diapers at 2 a.m, I'd imagine the smell of rising dough. While preparing bottles, I'd envision decorating cakes with delicate buttercream flowers. The dream became more vivid the more impossible it became, like my brain was torturing me with what I'd given up. Maya would visit maybe twice a week, always with an excuse for why she couldn't take Quinn yet. The apartment I'm looking at doesn't allow children under 3. I'm starting a new job next week and need to make a good impression first. My roommate's boyfriend is moving in and there's no space. I'd watch her interact with her son, this distant, distracted quality to her attention. She'd hold him like he was a borrowed object she'd have to return, not the child she'd grown inside her body. And I'd feel this terrible mixture of anger and pity, because I recognized something in her eyes. Fear. The same fear I'd felt when she was born, that overwhelming terror of being responsible for another human's entire existence. But I'd had no choice back then. I was her mother. I had to figure it out. So why did she get to opt out? The turning point, or maybe it was just the beginning of the end, came on a particularly brutal afternoon. Quinn had been crying for 3 hours straight. Nothing helped. Not food, not a new diaper, not rocking, not singing, not walking in circles until my knees ached. He just cried and cried and cried. I tried everything I could remember from my own mothering days. The rhythmic shushing, the warm bath, the white noise machine I'd ordered in desperation. I even tried that trick where you run the vacuum cleaner because the sound supposedly soothes babies. Nothing worked. Quinn's face was red and scrunched, his little fists balled up in fury or discomfort or whatever babies feel when their world is wrong. My neighbor knocked on the wall, 3 sharp raps that clearly meant keep it down. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both, keep it down, as if I hadn't been trying for hours to do exactly that. I found myself in the bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid, hands pressed over my ears, tears streaming down my face. Through the wall, I could still hear him wailing, and I thought, this isn't my child. I did this already. I earned my freedom. Why am I back in this prison? The word prison shocked me, even in my own thoughts. What kind of monster thinks of a baby as a prison? But I couldn't take it back, couldn't unsee the truth of it. I was trapped, not by Quinn's needs, babies need what they need, but by Maya's manipulation, by my own inability to say no, by decades of conditioning that told me good mothers sacrifice everything, always, without complaint. The guilt that followed that thought was crushing. What kind of grandmother thinks of her grandson as a prison sentence? What kind of person resents an innocent baby for existing? But there it was, the truth I'd been avoiding. I didn't want this. I'd never wanted this. I'd wanted to be the fun grandmother who visits on weekends and returns the child when they're tired or dirty. Not this, never this. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to Quinn's restless movements through the baby monitor, and I felt my youth slipping away. I was 58 years old. 58. According to statistics, I probably had 20 good years left, maybe 30 if I was lucky. And I was spending them changing diapers again. I got up and went to my home office, the one room I'd tried to keep sacred. My desk was covered in dusty papers I hadn't looked at in months, bills, bank statements, and underneath it all, my business plan for the bakery. I'd written it out so carefully, researched everything, created spreadsheets and projections and menu ideas. Flour and Grace Bakery, I'd named it. Grace had been my mother's name. I imagined a place with warm lighting and mismatched vintage plates, where people could linger over coffee and fresh pastries. I'd pictured myself at 60, finally doing the thing I'd always wanted to do, finally living for myself after decades of living for others. But the money I'd saved for the commercial oven was gone, used for Quinn's medical bills when he had that ear infection. The money for the lease deposit went to a new crib when he outgrew the bassinet. The money for licensing and permits got absorbed into the endless costs of diapers and formula and baby clothes that he outgrew every few weeks. I did the math that night. At this rate, I'd need another decade to save what I'd already lost. I'd be 68 before I could even think about opening the bakery. 68. Would I even have the energy then? Would anyone want to loan money to a first-time business owner at that age? The dream was dying, and I was watching it happen in real time, powerless to stop it. Or maybe not powerless. Maybe just unwilling to do what needed to be done. Because here's the thing about family. It's not really unconditional love, is it? It's conditional on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. It's conditional on your ability to keep giving until there's nothing left. And if you dare to set a boundary, if you dare to say, no, this is too much, then suddenly you're selfish. Suddenly you're the bad guy. I closed my laptop and went back to bed, but I couldn't stop thinking about a conversation I'd had with my sister Rachel last month. She'd called to check in, heard Quinn crying in the background for the 10th time during our call, and said something I'd been trying to forget. You know she's using you, right? Maya's always been good at finding someone else to handle her responsibilities. I'd defended my daughter instantly, automatically, made excuses about how hard it is for single mothers, about the economy, about the housing market. But Rachel just sighed and said, "Mom did the same thing to you. Don't you remember? You were stuck taking care of her for 3 years while your brother lived his life. This is the family pattern, and you're repeating it." I'd hung up angry, but now in the dark, I wondered if she was right. My mother had guilt-tripped me into becoming her caregiver when she was only 63 and perfectly capable of living independently. She just didn't want to. She wanted company, attention, someone to manage her life. And I'd done it because that's what daughters do. That's what I'd been taught. Was Maya doing the same thing to me? Was this cycle going to continue forever? Each generation sacrificing the next? Quinn started crying again. 2:47 in the morning. I got up, warmed a bottle, changed his diaper, rocked him back to sleep. The routine was so automatic now I could do it half asleep. And maybe that was the scariest part. I was adapting. I was accepting this as my new normal. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and the resignation, something was starting to crack. The discovery came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, the kind where Phoenix's heat makes everything shimmer like a mirage. I was cleaning out the coat closet, trying to make space for Quinn's growing collection of winter clothes he'd probably outgrow before next year. That's when I found it. Wedged between old photo albums and my deceased husband's golf clubs, I couldn't bear to donate. A manila folder, thin but heavy with implication. I almost didn't open it, almost put it back and continued with my cleaning. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way Maya's handwriting on the tab looked hurried, guilty. Job prospects, confidential. Inside were printouts, job applications, all dated between 8 and 12 months ago. Positions in Seattle, Portland, Denver. High-paying tech jobs that required immediate starts and no remote work options. Every single one explicitly stated no children, full relocation expected. My hands started shaking. Not from anger yet, but from the cognitive dissonance of trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what Maya had been telling me. She'd said she was looking for apartments in Phoenix. She'd said she was trying to find childcare. She'd said this was temporary, just until she got on her feet. But these applications told a different story. She'd been planning to leave Phoenix entirely, to leave Quinn, to leave me holding the bag while she started fresh somewhere new. I sat down right there on the closet floor, surrounded by winter coats and old memories, and tried to remember the last time Maya had actually looked me in the eye during one of her visits. Tried to remember if she'd ever directly promised to take Quinn back, or if she'd always used that vague, non-committal language people use when they're lying by omission. I'm working on it, Mom. Soon, I promise. Just need a little more time. Never next month, or by Christmas, or any actual timeline. Just endless, elastic, soon. I wanted to call her immediately to demand explanations, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of being manipulated, of having my concerns dismissed as overreactions. Maybe it was the fear that she'd have some perfectly reasonable explanation that would make me feel crazy for doubting her. Or maybe I was finally learning to gather my evidence before confronting. The folder had dates. She'd started applying to out-of-state jobs right around the time Quinn turned 6 months old, right when the 1-month arrangement was already stretching into 4. She'd known. She'd known this whole time she wasn't planning to stay in Phoenix, wasn't planning to raise her son. That night, I couldn't eat. I made Quinn his dinner, gave him his bath, read him his bedtime story, did all the mechanical motions of caregiving while my mind raced. I kept pulling up those job applications on my phone, reading them over and over, trying to find some alternative explanation that didn't involve my daughter deliberately deceiving me. But there wasn't one. The evidence was clear. Maya had been planning her escape route while using me as her permanent babysitter. While I was sacrificing my dreams and my savings and my remaining good years, she was plotting her new life, the one that didn't include her son. I started noticing other things then, details that hadn't seemed significant before, but now formed a damning pattern. Maya never asked about my health anymore, the fragile health she'd used as justification for moving in. She never asked about my plans or my dreams. Our conversations were entirely about Quinn or about her own struggles, as if I existed solely as a supporting character in her story. When had I become invisible? When had my needs stopped mattering? There's this thing that happens when you've been manipulated for a long time. You start doubting your own perceptions. You think, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm the problem. But looking at those job applications, I couldn't doubt anymore. This wasn't my imagination. This was calculated deception. I thought about all the times Maya had said she was applying for apartments, but never showed me listings. All the times she claimed to be talking to landlords, but never had details to share. All the times she'd promised to take Quinn this weekend, but something always came up at the last minute. She'd been stalling, running out the clock, hoping I'd eventually just accept this arrangement permanently because what else could I do? Kick out my own daughter and grandson? That would make me the villain, wouldn't it? That would make me the selfish one who abandoned her family. It was brilliant, in a terrible way. She'd trapped me with my own maternal instinct, my own belief that family comes first. She'd weaponized my love against me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror that night and barely recognized the woman staring back. Deep lines had carved themselves around my mouth, etched by 2 years of forced smiles and swallowed complaints. My eyes had lost their brightness. My shoulders curved forward in a permanent defensive hunch. I looked exhausted. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like my mother had looked when I was taking care of her, giving up my own life to manage hers. The same haunted expression, the same physical manifestation of invisible burdens. The family curse passed down through generations like genetic trauma. Studies show domestic violence might be the biggest risk factor for child abuse, and while Maya hadn't hit me, there's violence in neglect too. Violence in using someone until they're hollow. Violence in stealing someone's future and calling it family obligation. Quinn was sleeping peacefully in his crib, innocent of the rage building in my chest. None of this was his fault. He didn't ask to be born to a mother who couldn't handle motherhood. He didn't ask to be abandoned with a grandmother who'd already raised her children. But I couldn't keep doing this. The revelation from those job applications had cracked something open inside me, and I couldn't seal it back up. The anger was out now, righteous and overdue. I'd spent 2 years being patient, being understanding, being the good mother who sacrifices everything for her child. And what had it gotten me? A daughter who was planning to flee the state without her son. A grandson I loved but never agreed to raise. A demolished dream and an empty bank account. I thought about that statistic again, 1 in 5 nursing home residents experiencing neglect. I thought about becoming that statistic in another decade or two, having given up everything for people who would eventually abandon me anyway. Is that what family loyalty got you? A room in an understaffed facility where you'd die alone because everyone you sacrificed for had moved on? No, not me. Not anymore. I became my own detective then, my own ally in a situation where no one else would fight for me. I started documenting everything. Maya's visits, or lack thereof. The money I'd spent. The promises she'd broken. I took photos of my bank statements showing the depletion of my bakery fund. I saved text messages where she'd said, just a little longer. I needed proof because I knew what was coming. I knew that when I finally confronted her, she'd deny everything. She'd make me seem crazy, unreasonable, cruel. She'd flip the script and make herself the victim. I'd seen her do it before, watched her manipulate her way out of consequences her entire adult life. But not this time. This time I had evidence. This time I had righteous anger fueling me instead of guilt. I spent a week planning, a week watching and waiting and gathering information. Maya came by on Thursday, stayed for 30 minutes, played with Quinn in that distracted way she had, and left. She didn't ask how I was doing, didn't offer to take Quinn for the weekend, didn't bring diapers or formula or contribute anything. On Friday, I saw her post on Instagram a photo from a bar downtown with friends, caption about finally getting her life back together. She looked happy, radiant, free, while I was home with her son, counting the hours until his next feeding. Something crystallized in me then, a cold, clear determination. I was done being used, done being invisible, done sacrificing for someone who couldn't even pretend to appreciate it. I called Maya Saturday morning. "I need to talk to you. Come over today, alone." My voice was steady, controlled. She tried to deflect, said she was busy, but I didn't budge. "Today, Maya, it's important." "Mom, I really can't. Brittany and I are supposed to—" "Today," I repeated, letting ice creep into my tone. Or I start making calls to family services about an abandoned child. The silence on the other end was deafening. I'd never threatened her before, never used that voice. After a long pause, she said, "Fine, I'll be there around 3. She arrived late afternoon, annoyed and defensive before I'd even spoken. "What's so urgent, Mom? I have plans tonight." She was dressed for going out, makeup carefully applied, hair styled, wearing clothes I recognized as expensive. Meanwhile, I was in the same yoga pants I'd been wearing for 3 days, because who has time for laundry when you're solo parenting? The contrast between us in that moment was stark. She looked like someone living her life. I looked like someone drowning. I handed her the folder, watched her face go pale, watched the exact moment recognition and panic flashed across her features. "Want to explain these?" She started with denial. "I don't know what you're talking about." Then deflection. "You went through my things?" Then justification. "I was just exploring options. It doesn't mean anything." I let her talk, let her dig her hole deeper, and then I hit her with the truth, calm and factual and devastating. "You've been planning to leave Phoenix for at least a year. You never intended to take Quinn. You used my health as an excuse to move in, then used my love for my grandson to trap me into permanent childcare. You've stolen 2 years of my life and over $30,000 from my savings. And you've lied to my face the entire time." She tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. I found your job applications. I have records of every broken promise. I have bank statements showing exactly what this has cost me. And I have witnesses who can testify to your neglect of your own child." That last part was a bluff, but it worked. Maya's face crumbled. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, might actually show some remorse. Instead, she attacked. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. What was I supposed to do? Raise a baby alone with no support?" And there it was, the core of her entitlement, the belief that being my daughter meant I owed her everything, including my future. "What you were supposed to do," I said quietly, "was be honest. Ask for help instead of manipulating. Discuss options instead of making unilateral decisions about my life. Respect me as a person instead of treating me like free childcare." She stood up, grabbed her purse. "I can't believe you're doing this. After everything I've been through." "Everything you've been through?" The words exploded out of me. "I'm 58 years old, Maya. I had plans, dreams, a whole life I was supposed to start living, and you took it from me without even asking if I wanted to give it up. So what are you saying? You're kicking us out? You're abandoning your own grandson?" There it was, the guilt trip, the manipulation, the twist that made me the villain. But I'd prepared for this. I'd rehearsed my response until I could say it without wavering. "I'm saying you have 2 weeks to make arrangements, real arrangements. Find childcare, find housing, figure out your life, because I'm done being your safety net while you figure out your escape plan." 2 weeks? That's impossible. "You've had 2 years, Maya. You've had plenty of time. You just chose not to use it because why would you when I was doing everything for free?" She left then, slamming the door hard enough to wake Quinn. I picked him up, soothed his cries, and felt nothing but relief. The confrontation was over. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, at least I'd finally spoken up. The next week was hell. Maya called repeatedly, alternating between rage and tears. She tried enlisting other family members to guilt me. My brother called, saying I was being too harsh. My cousin sent a long text about family obligations. Even Maya's father, who'd been absent for most of her childhood, suddenly appeared with opinions about my parenting. But I held firm. I'd found something in that confrontation. My spine, maybe. My sense of self. The woman I used to be before I let everyone else's needs consume me. Maya tried one more manipulation. She came by with Quinn's pediatrician records, claiming he had special needs that required my care specifically. I called her bluff and spoke directly to the doctor, who confirmed Quinn was perfectly healthy. Another lie exposed. She tried claiming she couldn't find childcare. I sent her a list of 20 affordable options in Phoenix. She tried claiming she couldn't afford to move. I showed her the bank records of how much she'd cost me, enough to cover 6 months of rent. Every excuse, I had a counter. Every manipulation I saw through. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating, like finally learning to play a game I'd been losing for years. But here's what nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. Sometimes there's no satisfying resolution. Sometimes the villain doesn't learn their lesson. Sometimes they just leave. On day 13, Maya showed up with her friend Brittany and a U-Haul. They packed up Quinn's things, the crib, the toys, the clothes, in about 3 hours. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge anything I'd said, just loaded up and left, Quinn in his car seat, barely awake. She texted me from the road. "I'm staying with Brittany for now. Don't expect to hear from me for a while. You've made your choice." And that was it. No consequences, no public accountability, no moment where she realized what she'd done and begged forgiveness. She just walked away, taking her son, leaving me with an empty guest room and 2 years of stolen life I'd never get back. The house felt enormous that first night, silent. I wandered from room to room, picking up the toys Maya had missed, finding Quinn's pacifiers in odd places. I should have felt victorious. I'd stood up for myself. I'd reclaimed my life. I'd set a boundary. So why did I feel so empty? I found myself standing in the guest room, staring at the empty space where Quinn's crib had been. There was a slight indentation in the carpet from its weight. A tiny sock peeked out from under the dresser, blue with little dinosaurs on it. I picked it up and held it in my palm, this impossibly small piece of clothing that had kept my grandson's tiny foot warm. The silence was oppressive. For 2 years, this house had been filled with noise, crying, laughing, the endless loop of children's songs, the sound of tiny feet learning to walk. Now there was nothing, just me and the echo of my own breathing. I sat down on the floor, right where the crib had been, and let myself cry properly for the first time since Maya left. Not angry tears or frustrated tears, but deep, grieving sobs for everything this situation had cost. The relationship with my daughter that might never recover. The years with my grandson I'd never get back. The version of myself who'd believed family love was simple and unconditional. I called Rachel. "Is this how it's supposed to feel? Like I won, but also lost?" She was quiet for a moment. "You did the right thing, but doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Give it time." Time, I repeated, tasting the word. Time was all I'd wanted back. Time for myself, time to pursue my dreams, time to just exist without constant demands. Now I had it, and it felt like a punishment. I wanted to ask, time for what? For the guilt to fade? For Maya to apologize? For Quinn to forgive me for not being there as he grew up? But I was too tired for those answers. Do you think that was fair? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Because some nights, I still don't know if I made the right call. I know I made the necessary one. But right? That's harder to measure. The weeks after Maya left felt like learning to walk after a long illness. Everything was familiar, but also strange. My house was my own again, but it felt too big, too quiet. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, conditioned by 2 years of nighttime feedings, and lie there in the dark, listening to silence. I started small. Cleaned out the guest room, donated the baby things to a women's shelter. Every onesie I folded felt like shedding a layer of resentment. The crib went to a young couple down the street. They were so grateful it made me want to cry. They had no idea what I was releasing with that furniture. No idea it represented 2 years of stolen dreams. My sister Rachel came to visit a month after Maya left. She found me in the kitchen, staring at my closed laptop, unable to open my bakery business plan. The numbers had changed so drastically, I didn't even know where to start recalculating. "You look terrible," she said, because Rachel never believed in softening truth. "Thanks, that's helpful. I'm serious. When's the last time you did something for yourself? Something that had nothing to do with Maya or Quinn or anyone else?" I couldn't remember. That realization hit harder than it should have. Rachel made me coffee and sat me down. "You spent 2 years in crisis mode. You can't just flip a switch and go back to who you were. That woman doesn't exist anymore. You have to figure out who you are now." She was right, of course. I'd changed. The things I'd looked forward to before, quiet mornings, spontaneous plans, uninterrupted sleep, they felt hollow now that I had them. Like I'd forgotten how to exist without the weight of constant responsibility. But slowly, gradually, I started rebuilding. I signed up for a community cooking class at the rec center. Just 1 night a week, nothing intense. But standing at that counter, following a recipe, measuring ingredients with other people who were there just because they wanted to be, it was the first time in 2 years I'd felt like a person instead of a function. A woman named Martha befriended me there. She was 63, recently widowed, learning to cook because her husband had always handled it. We were both learning to fill spaces that used to be occupied by obligation. "My kids think I should move in with one of them," she told me one evening while we waited for our soufflés to rise. "They say I'm too old to live alone. But you know what? I'm not ready to be a burden. I'm not ready to stop being myself." I understood that completely. We started meeting for coffee outside of class. She introduced me to her book club, 6 women who met monthly to discuss novels and, more honestly, to drink wine and talk about everything but novels. They welcomed me instantly, this tribe of women who'd all survived their own versions of being erased. 3 months after Maya left, I got an email from a former colleague. She'd started a catering company and was looking for someone to handle the baking side. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was flexible, creative, and it was something. A start. I almost didn't respond. The old fear crept in. What if Maya needed me again? What if Quinn got sick? What if committing to anything meant I couldn't be available? But then I remembered those job applications. I remembered Maya planning her future while I put mine on hold. I remembered that family loyalty had been entirely one-directional. I took the job. The first event I catered was a retirement party. 50 people, appetizers and desserts, nothing too complicated. But standing in that kitchen, creating something beautiful, watching people enjoy what I'd made, I felt a piece of myself click back into place. A piece I'd forgotten existed. I started volunteering at a community kitchen downtown. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I'd go in and help prepare meals for people experiencing homelessness. It wasn't glamorous. The kitchen was old, the equipment temperamental, the hours early. But there was something profound about feeding people who genuinely needed feeding, about choosing who to nourish instead of having it demanded of me. I met a man there, actually, Carlos. He coordinated the volunteer schedules and had the warmest laugh I'd ever heard. We started chatting during breaks, then getting coffee after shifts, then going to farmers markets on weekends. He asked me out properly 6 months after Maya left. I said yes, then immediately panicked. What if this got serious? What if he wanted commitment? What if Maya came back and needed... I stopped myself. Maya wasn't coming back. And even if she did, I couldn't live my entire life on standby for her crises. Carlos and I took it slow. He knew about Maya and Quinn because I'd learned not to hide my story anymore. He listened without judgment, shared his own complicated family dynamics, and never once made me feel guilty for having boundaries. One evening, we were cooking dinner together at his place. He was teaching me his grandmother's tamale recipe when his daughter called. She was struggling with childcare, asking if he could help. I watched him navigate the conversation, offering resources and emotional support, but gently declining to become a permanent solution. After he hung up, he saw my expression. What? How do you do that? Say no without feeling like you're abandoning her? I'm not abandoning her. I'm letting her solve her own problems like the capable adult she is. There's a difference. That conversation shifted something fundamental in me. I'd spent so long believing that helping meant sacrificing everything, but Carlos was showing me another way. Support without self-destruction. Love without erasure. A year after Maya left, I got a text. Just, "Quinn asks about you sometimes." I stared at it for an hour before responding. What was the right answer? What did I owe that little boy who I'd cared for but never asked to raise? I wrote back, "I think about him too. How is he?" The conversation was stilted, careful. Maya told me they were living in Seattle now. She'd gotten one of those tech jobs. Quinn was in daycare, doing well, hitting all his milestones. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge what had happened, but she also didn't ask me for anything, and somehow that felt like progress. "Would you want to video chat with him sometime?" she asked. I said yes, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to see the child I'd helped raise, to know he was okay. We scheduled calls once a month. They were brief, surface level, but they were something. A new boundary. A new relationship built on terms I could sustain. My bakery fund was recovering slowly. I'd started a small side business selling at farmers markets on weekends. Cookies, brownies, my grandmother's banana bread. It wasn't the storefront I'd dreamed of, but it was mine. Every dollar earned felt like reclaiming territory. The women from my book club became my chosen family. We celebrated each other's victories, supported each other through difficulties, and most importantly, we saw each other as complete people, not just mothers or grandmothers or daughters, but individuals with dreams and fears and messy, complicated lives. Martha opened a pottery studio at 64. Another friend, Deborah, went back to school for her master's degree at 61. We were all writing second chapters, refusing to accept that our lives were over just because we'd reached a certain age or fulfilled certain traditional roles. I started keeping a journal, something my therapist suggested. Writing down not just what happened, but how I felt about it. The anger was still there, but it had transformed from something hot and consuming to something colder, clearer. A determination never to lose myself again. Some nights I'd look at photos from when Quinn was a baby. There were happy moments mixed in with the resentment. His first smile, first laugh, first steps. The love I felt for him was real, even if the circumstances were wrong. I was learning to hold both truths simultaneously. I loved him, and I couldn't sacrifice my life for him. Both could be true. I ran into Maya's father at the grocery store 18 months after she'd left. He tried to lecture me about family values, about how I should have been more understanding. I let him finish his speech, then said, "Where were you when Maya needed help? When I was drowning? Why is it my job to sacrifice everything when you've contributed nothing?" He didn't have an answer. He just walked away, and I felt a fierce satisfaction. I was done accepting criticism from people who'd never shown up. My catering business grew. I hired help, 2 young women who needed flexible work and loved baking. Training them, watching them improve, building something sustainable, it gave me purpose without consuming me. I was creating something larger than myself without losing myself in the process. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. It's about intergenerational trauma and why understanding it might save you from the same trap I fell into. Here's what I didn't realize for most of my life. Patterns repeat in families because we're taught they're normal. My mother used me as her emotional support and caretaker because her mother had done the same to her. I'd felt guilty resenting it because that's what families do. And Maya was following that same blueprint, except this time it wasn't going to work, because I finally recognized the pattern and chose to break it. Intergenerational trauma isn't always obvious abuse. Sometimes it's subtle. Expectations that you'll sacrifice without question, beliefs that your worth is measured by your service to others, an inability to say no without crushing guilt. It's passed down through modeling, through shame, through unexamined assumptions about duty and love. When I was caring for my mother, I believed I had no choice. When I was raising Maya, I believed sacrifice was the same as love. When Maya left Quinn with me, I initially believed that was just what grandmothers do. But at each stage, I was repeating a pattern that had damaged every woman in my family line. The cycle continues because breaking it feels like betrayal. When I finally set boundaries with Maya, family members I barely spoke to called me selfish. They invoked family values and blood ties and accused me of abandoning my daughter in her time of need. But none of them offered to help. None of them stepped up. They just wanted me to keep playing the role that made their lives easier. Here's what I learned that I wish someone had told me decades ago. Your children are not entitled to your entire existence. Supporting them is loving. Sacrificing your health, dreams, and future is not. There's a line between helping and enabling, between generosity and exploitation. And if you can't identify that line, other people will gladly cross it for you. If you're in a situation like mine, ask yourself these questions. First, is this truly temporary, or are there signs it's becoming permanent? Look at actions, not promises. Maya said 1 month, but had already applied to jobs that would make coming back impossible. Her actions revealed her real intentions. Second, is the person asking for help also asking what you need? Or is the help entirely one-directional? In 2 years, Maya never once asked about my dreams or my plans. That tells you everything about how she saw me, not as a person, but as a resource. Third, what are you sacrificing, and is it proportional to the emergency? Quinn needed care, yes. But Maya's failure to plan wasn't actually my emergency. She had options: childcare, family services, career changes. She chose the easiest option, which was using me. Fourth, and this is crucial, what pattern are you modeling for the next generation? Quinn is learning about relationships by watching how his mother treats me. If I'd accepted permanent exploitation, I'd be teaching him that's normal. That's how trauma passes down. The intergenerational aspect is why this matters beyond just my story. Studies show that family dysfunction tends to repeat across at least 3 generations unless someone consciously breaks the cycle. I was generation 2, repeating what had been done to me. If I hadn't stopped it, Quinn would likely grow up expecting the same from his own children. Breaking cycles requires 2 things most people don't talk about: grief and guilt. Grief because you're letting go of fantasies about how family should work. Guilt because you're violating rules you've internalized your entire life. I felt both intensely, and sometimes I still do. But here's what I feel more strongly now: freedom. Not the selfish freedom of abandoning responsibilities, but the authentic freedom of living according to my actual values instead of inherited scripts. I'm still a good mother, still a loving grandmother. But I'm also a person with boundaries, dreams, and a right to my own life. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, here's my advice. Start small. You don't have to blow up your life overnight like I did. Start by noticing the pattern. Ask yourself, who taught me that sacrifice equals love? Who benefits from me believing that? What would change if I questioned it? Then practice boundary setting in low-stakes situations. Say no to small requests without over-explaining. Notice who respects your no and who tries to guilt you out of it. Those reactions tell you who in your life sees you as a person versus a resource. Find your people, the ones who support your wholeness instead of your usefulness. Rachel, Carlos, my book club women, these are the people who celebrated my boundaries instead of condemning them. Chosen family can be stronger than biological family when biological family is dysfunctional. And please, if you're older like me, remember this. Your life isn't over. You haven't had your turn. Every decade you're alive is a decade you deserve to live fully. Don't let anyone convince you that reaching a certain age means you're now just support staff for younger generations. The most radical thing I did wasn't kicking Maya out. It was deciding I mattered, that my dreams mattered, that my remaining years mattered. In a culture that often treats older women as invisible or disposable, claiming your worth is revolutionary. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know this was a long story, but some truths can't be rushed. If you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, I want to know, where are you, and what time is it there? Drop a comment letting me know. I love imagining all of you in different cities and time zones connected by these stories we share. If something in this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in my struggle or my choices, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories, and maybe my experience can help someone else recognize their own situation before they lose as much time as I did. And I have to ask, what would you have done in my place? Would you have set the boundaries sooner, later, differently? The comment section is where we really process these stories together, so please share your thoughts. I read every single one. If you're not subscribed yet, please consider clicking that button. I share these stories not to complain or seek sympathy, but because I believe we need to talk about these family dynamics more openly. The shame and silence around them is part of what keeps the patterns going. Before you go, I want to recommend 2 other videos you might connect with. There's one about a woman who discovered her husband had been stealing her inheritance, and another about a daughter who finally confronted her narcissistic mother. Both stories deal with those difficult moments when you realize family isn't always what you thought it was. Until the next story, please take care of your heart, protect your peace. Remember that boundaries aren't selfish. They're self-preservation. And know that it's never too late to reclaim your life. I'm still learning that myself, still building my second chapter. The bakery dream has evolved. I may never have the storefront, but I have my farmer's market stand, my catering business, my community kitchen work. I have autonomy, purpose, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Some days I still feel guilty about Quinn. I wonder if he'll resent me when he's older, if he'll understand why his grandmother wasn't there for his childhood. But I also know that staying would have destroyed me, and a destroyed grandmother wouldn't have been good for him either. Maya and I will probably never have the relationship I once hoped for. That's a loss I'm still processing, but I'm learning that you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can wish them well while maintaining distance. You can hope for change without waiting for it to happen before living your own life. The woman I am now, scarred, wiser, rebuilding, she's someone I'm starting to respect. She made hard choices. She survived something that could have broken her. She's learning to dream again, smaller dreams maybe, but dreams that belong entirely to her. That's the ending I'm choosing, not the perfect resolution where everyone apologizes and learns their lesson, not the fairy tale where family love conquers all, just the honest truth.